All right, now, everybody. Quiet, listen to me. We're going to start a show. Now, some of you people have been with me before. You know it's going to be a tough grind, but we're going to have a show.
And hello all. It is a little after 11 a.m. live on the West Coast. It's a little after 2 o'clock live on the East Coast. And then all of the great time zones in between and across the world. I am on remote today, a remote broadcast from San Francisco, California, a city that I love, a city that I think has some issues. But I also think it's a city that represents a lot of the urban issues in America that are being treated with a new seriousness. And frankly, with the politics of progressive governing being questioned, at least when it comes to law and order. You know, I'm a kind of tough law and order guy, but I would say that more than anything, I'm just delighted to be in this most magnificent town, San Francisco, at the best time of year to be in San Francisco, which is October. It typically is the month during which the fog doesn't really dominate the landscape. That cold, wet breeze off the bay and the ocean doesn't come in, and it is pretty glorious. And I'm here for a glorious reason, and I will tell you about the glorious reason. I am... by the way, I'll just make this note now. You can see I'm sort of working with a portable rig. We'll have to see how the levels all work out. And,
sound good.
Yeah,
sound
do
good,
I? Okay.
Good. Yeah, everything's good.
Kim is here.
Kim, how are you?
And Tony is here. So
thanks, Tony.
I will count on Tony mostly to watch the levels.
Music
Although sometimes when you say you're watching the levels, Tony, the levels still can be a little bit bonkers.
I know.
So I need you to develop new ways to monitor the levels, if you would, please. I think the existing ways are not always effective.
I'm building a new rig so I can do things different, so I can produce better, actually. So
I certainly hope so.
A new rig is being built, so just so you know.
A new rig is being built.
A whole new setup is going to be soon.
Wow.
Thanks, Tony. I'm really going to build my editing bay and then a producer bay is what I'm going to do.
Oh,
so.
wow.
I love this. Wow, he's really committing to it. We should all have the same commitment that Tony has. He's building a new rig. Kim, are you building a rig or you have any kind of rig? What are you building? No,
I'm here in my lovely home office. No, no rig here. Hey, I just saw you take a sip of the coffee there at the hotel. You're at the hotel,
It is not
right?
Coachella Valley coffee, which is
No.
I'm going through withdrawal. Yeah.
How is San Francisco? Do you feel the magic?
I love San Francisco. I love San Francisco. I feel the magic every time I come over the Bay Bridge or Golden Gate Bridge. I love it. In this case, the Bay Bridge, I landed in Oakland, and I look back over the bay, and I see the Golden Gate Bridge, and I see the city and the city skyline, which is so much different than when I lived here, which was during the 80s, believe it or not.
We have the Salesforce Tower now.
Exactly, Salesforce Tower. And I'm sorry, San Francisco is a magnificent city. And by the way, that's one reason that we're all so angry about what's happened in San Francisco, about how there has been, I think, lax leadership in the way of law and order. That's why we had Brooke Jenkins on, and we had Chesa Boudin on this show, and we had those people who are in, we had, as I recall, an SFPD lieutenant on the show. We talked a bit about San Francisco because we were born in San Francisco out of a big radio show on KGO Radio, which is a magnificent, giant talk radio station that went away. And when it went away, we came here to YouTube, as you know. So anyway, with strong ties to the Bay Area, it is really great to be back. And I was riding in the car to the San Francisco Fall Show, which we'll talk about in a second, because Courtney is with me, and we came here for the Fall Show. The San Francisco Fall Show is everything we said it was and more. Okay, I went to a special preview. It's so great. I'm telling you, wherever you are in the Bay Area, it's worth it. Jump in the car, jump on the train, however you get to San Francisco, and then take a taxi or Uber to Fort Mason, the Festival Pavilion at Fort Mason, and go to the San Francisco show. More on that in a moment. because we're going again today, and we're going on Friday. And if people come today around 3:30, we'll meet up with you and just we'll kind of look at some stuff together because we really had a great time. Anyway, what was I saying? Something about I've lost my thought. There it is, San Francisco Fall Show at Fort Mason. This is now through Sunday. Now this camera is pitched on a thing that kind of moves, so it's got the cruise ship feel where I kind of like, whoa, I'll tell you, we're taking it. But you'll let me know if it drifts to one side or another. Okay, Tony, that would really be great. So
thanks, Tony.
I forget what I was saying. It's not important. I want to welcome in my my darling who is with me.
The Mark Thompson Show.
Wait, for the 39 minutes, what is this? Of microdose Don's swaying to his playlist. Happy 2-year anniversary from Tess Downey. There's a $39 super chat. Happy 2nd-year anniversary, MT team. I was one of the many who was listening when KGO abruptly changed. I miss KGO, but not the Cars for Kids jingle.
We can always sing it for you. Hum it if you missed it a lot.
Yeah, your new format rocks. Yeah, they have a lot of different arrangements of the Cars for Kids jingles. When you have to listen to them over and over again,
and they were all equally bad.
Yeah, you do have a favorite though. You do have the ones that they had rock jingles. They had the kids singing. It was all pretty awful, but yeah.
Inside radio thing. When that spot would air, I could just turn the speakers off in the room, and that's what I would do. I would listen to silence.
I think you and the listeners, oddly, we both had the same dance when that came on.
I always heard a few seconds of it before I threw my headphones down in disgust. Couldn't get them off fast enough.
See, as you know, the zen of my life, I ride the horse in the direction it's running. So I was there going, 1-899 Cars for Kids.
No.
KARS Cars for Kids. 1-877 Cars for Kids.
Stop it. Stop it right now.
Donate your God today. All right. I want a quick, I have Kamala Harris. I have Donald Trump. I have early impressions of what may be big turnout in the state of Georgia. In fact, I have a candidate in the state of Georgia running for Congress from the state of Georgia who will join us at the bottom of this hour. So that's going to be pretty cool. I'm looking forward to, and this is our follow-up with Bob Christian. We had him on once before. We're going to have him on again, get a sense for the state of the race and what's happening in Georgia. But first, if you would please, and now I will.
The Mark Thompson Show.
I'll welcome in my other half, my better half. I wouldn't be here without her because she is the one with the eye for design and art, and she takes me to the greatest things. And this is, again, falling into that category. How about it for Courtney, everybody? Yeah. Courtney, I love this San Francisco Fall Show. I can't believe how much I loved it. It is going on, as we said, at Fort Mason at the Festival Pavilion. And thank you for turning me on to it. Maybe you could let everybody know what it is. I don't hear Courtney, and there might be a reason for that. I see Courtney.
She's muted.
She's muted. Okay. You got to unmute, Courtney, if you would, please. I've got limited time, so please respect who I am and what this is. And okay.
Well, I have anyway. I have headphones on, so I thought you could hear from that, but maybe not.
Well, okay. I don't need a whole breakdown on that, Courtney. Let's try to get to
Bay Area, Courtney. Welcome.
Yeah.
Thank you. It's incredible to be here. I love this city, and the show last night was amazing. I mean, it was beyond what I think we both expected, and it was just a lot of fun and incredibly interesting. The exhibitors are extraordinary. There's actually some exhibitors from LA, so I was familiar with some of the galleries that are there. But I can't encourage anyone enough to make a day trip out of it because it really was fantastic. The San Francisco Fall Show has been an institution in San Francisco for 42 years. It covers design, so interior design. It covers antiques.
So you walk through,
art.
and it's like almost like what would you call it? Like it's like a convention of great design and art. So each thing that you're seeing is kind of taking up a different space, and you can see these magnificent pieces of art and furniture and furnishings, and it's extraordinary. And of course, a lot of the stuff is for sale, and a lot of the stuff's super expensive.
I was going to say, can you buy stuff?
Yeah, but a lot of the stuff isn't super
and
expensive.
it's not super expensive. And
but even if you're just going through to get ideas or just to enjoy it, wow, it was really fun. I really had a good time.
And it's the tickets are $20, but then with our code of the show, which is Mark, MARK, all capitals, you can buy tickets on Eventbrite, or you can use Mark's name at the door. You get 25% off that. So you're going in for less than $20. And Izzy's is there, so you can have lunch and a cocktail. They're inside of the festival pavilion. Izzy's has a pop-up. And it was great. Every exhibitor that we spoke to said that this is the best show on the West Coast by far.
Wow.
Yeah, it was pretty amazing. We didn't even ask them. They would go, "This is your first time here?" We met a couple of British fellows who had various. And Mark, is this your first time to the show? I said, "Yeah, we've never been here before." He said, "This is the only show we do on the West Coast. This is the finest show on the West Coast." It's like, wow, this is. I felt like we really had happened on something that is super cool. So I encourage people to join. So here's what we're doing today. Because I got a lot of stuff to get onto the show today, obviously, with Kamala Harris and with the Telemundo thing that went down. I think it was Telemundo that Trump did.
Univision.
Univision, okay.
There was two you could pick from.
Yeah, Univision or Telemundo. So we'll get to those, but I wanted to just mention that we'll be there at 3:30 today. So if you do go to the San Francisco Fall Show at Fort Mason, the Festival Pavilion, easy to get to. It's only $20 with our discount code, and I think you'll really like it. If you don't like it, if you really don't like it, I'll refund your money because it's that good. I mean, it's, you know.
Yeah.
I want to go just so I can lean over to the guy at the door and go, "I'm here with Mark."
Yeah, Mark, please, the discount code Mark.
Yes,
but what I was going to say,
MARK.
if we're there, if you're there and we're there at 3:30, we'll knock around with you for a few minutes because we saw some cool stuff and we'd love to show you a couple of the cool things that we saw. And then I think we're going to a lecture at 4 o'clock or something. But at 3:30, we'll be there. We might have Spencer with us, too. We're going to see Spencer Christian today, so cool. He might be joining us. But anyway, more to the point, please. So you're saying, well, how will I know? Where will you be? If you do end up there, okay, at the San Francisco Fall Show at Fort Mason at 3:30, I want you to email the show, okay, the Mark Thompson Show at gmail.com. Email it from your phone, your magic device, all right? The Mark Thompson Show at gmail.com. Say, hey, we're here if you're around, and then we'll come meet you at the front door. Okay, that'll be the plan at 3:30. Again, we don't have all day, but we have a few minutes, and we'd love to say hi. So that's the San Francisco Fall Show today. Again, email us when you get there. We'll be there at 3:30, and we're looking forward to seeing everybody. It was so much fun, and I just think you'll really like it. So,
yeah, it was great. It was fantastic.
And
for
those,
we were there. You could spend hours there. I mean, it really is an extraordinary event, and the exhibitors are incredible, and they run the gamut of things. I mean, it is art and jewelry and antiques. We saw antique maps. The original
those were
map
so
of New York.
cool. Yes.
I was excited about the map.
Original planning
The
of New York.
cartography.
The original map of San Francisco is there. It is
What?
extraordinary. Yes. Yeah. It really
These aren't knockoffs.
so
These are originals.
cool.
It is incredible.
Yeah. I
How
mean,
much does that cost? How much is the original map of San Francisco?
we should
I
do a
don't
whip
remember.
around. How much was it? Do you remember, Mark?
I don't. It wasn't as much as I thought, but it was, more than I had on me.
Wow.
No, yeah. But there were maps that were more accessible than that, but just to see it is extraordinary. We were looking at these gorgeous maps, and some of them were from the 16th century. It's just it's phenomenal, and they're in really impeccable condition. Yeah.
Here's an idea: if you're going to go today to meet us there at 3:30, just hold up a sign with Mark Thompson on it. Yeah, that would work.
Yeah,
Spark. Very good. Yeah.
Yeah. No, it was fantastic.
Yeah, the old maps, and there are a lot of Instagram. If you're into Instagram, there are a lot of Instagram moments, like fun things that you can. I don't know. I was so yeah.
There was an exhibitor in, I think it's toward the back, D16, and the artist is a San Franciscan artist. He's in his 80s, and he does these really cool canvases that are not stretched and framed. So he staples them into the wall, and it's extraordinary. It's all done in charcoal, all by hand. I mean, we were there so late that the lights were on and security was walking.
Yeah, we closed the joint. We closed it. Yeah.
We did not want to leave. I can't tell you enough what an extraordinary and wonderful event this is. It really
so
was great.
Again, check it out. It's going on all weekend. We'll be there today and tomorrow because we have to go back home. But it's the SF Fall Show, sffallshow.org. You can get tickets there or at eventbrite.com, SF Fall Show. You'll look for that, and you'll use our discount code, all in capital letters, MARK. MARK. And again, it's 25% off, so it ends up being $20 to get in. And it's just terrific. You'll love it. I really believe you'll love it. And
Fort Mason, the Festival Pavilion.
Yeah. So we'll see you today at Fort Mason Festival Pavilion, maybe if you're there at 3:30, but otherwise go have fun. Order yourself an adult beverage or a mocktail and cruise. It's a really good scene. Courtney, thank you. Love you. Got some stuff to do. Appreciate it. Courtney, everybody.
Thanks for having me. Yeah.
All right. We'll talk again on Monday. Yeah, very good.
The Mark Thompson Show.
Well, it was a big day for the Kamala Harris people and for the Donald Trump people. And let's start first with Donald Trump. And then I'll get to Kamala, I promise, and we'll talk about what happened at Fox. I thought it was really a hit job, and I'll give you my sense of probably what went down prior, and then, of course, we have clips.
Did we do a poll, Tony?
Oh, yeah. Tony, let's start a poll.
Okay, I didn't get one in time. Sorry.
No, that's okay.
I can get one running.
Yeah, we'll get one. What would your poll question be, Kim?
How did Kamala Harris do on Fox News?
Yeah, that's not a poll question.
Success or failure?
Success, failure, or no, or
neutral.
Just failure or no, or
and this is why we don't have a poll yet.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Next time you suggest a poll, let's just not shout out, how about a poll? Let's have a question in mind.
Have a fully baked idea? Okay, that makes sense.
They do this to me all the time. I don't know what the hell they do it for.
Yeah, all right. So San Francisco looks good on you. Mark, welcome back, says Pietro. Thank you, Pietro. Great to be back in San Francisco. All right, let me now get to Trump at Telemundo. I guess we're not going to have a poll. It would be something like Harris's Fox interview. Successful, not successful, no change. That might be those three. Yeah. But I think Tony's got to run these videos for us now, so we can get to that. Polls are not hard, says, they are for us, apparently. Yeah, apparently they're really hard for us. Split Fries really says it straight. The Mark Thompson Show. Hey, LOL. Jesus, Mark, polls are not hard. Yeah, well, really, we make the easiest things super hard on this show. Good morning. Can you ask Mr. Katz about the judge who killed his wife in Orange County? And I'm still collecting his salary while in jail. That's from Uncle Scrooge. Well, two thoughts on that. Can you push that on to David Katz, that question, maybe? Kim, while I'm doing this, or if you would. I don't like to, but I can include it if Katz knows we're going to ask about it. Thank you. Thank you for all the nice words. I appreciate it. I want to get to this first clip. This is Donald Trump on Telemundo. Go ahead and roll it, please. Or on Univision, excuse me. Yeah. We'll have it for you in a second. This is Trump on Univision. There were a couple of key questions, one of which was about winning back your vote. I need you to win back my vote, Mr. Trump. And so here it is. I think Tony's...
One of the differences in the Univision town hall versus the Fox News woman town hall is that Fox apparently packed the town hall with Trump supporters. They didn't say they did it, but it was all women that were from Republican groups in town. And this one seemed like you actually got some questions from people that may have been Trump supporters at one time, but had some questions now.
This is what Kim is just saying is really important, because it is the fakery that's associated with Fox. Fox set up a town hall because it's really odd. It's a women's town hall. And, you know, one of the issues that Trump has from an electoral standpoint is trying to win over women, right? I mean, you essentially stacked a court so that you take away women's reproductive freedoms, so they no longer can do what they want with their body. So the idea somehow that you'd have a town hall room full of supporters is extraordinary. I mean, you'd think it would just be on some level textured with people who might disagree. But what Kim has just noted is so important. They, in essentially casting, put into place people who were already massive Trump supporters. They were leaders of the Republican club in their communities. There were MAGA leaders. Some of them were wearing MAGA merch, and that was the whole crowd. So Trump basically coasted through his town hall. Compare that to the mauling that was attempted of Kamala Harris in her Fox interview. But this is Trump. I don't know I don't know what you've got, Tony. What do you have, sir, please?
I am a Republican, no longer registered, though.
This is Univision. This is a real town hall that he was doing at Univision.
I want to give you the opportunity to try to win back my vote. Okay. You're
56 years old, born in New Jersey, of Cuban
and maybe
origin.
Inaction during your presidency and the last few years sort of, was a little disturbing to me. What happened during January 6th and the fact that, you waited so long to take action while your supporters were attacking the Capitol. Coronavirus, I thought the public was misled during coronavirus, and that many more lives could have been saved if we would have been informed better. And also people in your administration who don't support you. I'm curious how people so close to you and your administration no longer want to support you, so why would I want to support you? If you would answer these questions for me, I would really appreciate it and give you the opportunity. There's, your own vice president doesn't want to support you now.
Thank you, Ramiro. So the people that don't support a very small portion. We have a tremendous, about 97% of the people in the administration support me. But because it's me, somebody doesn't support, they get a little publicity. The vice president, I disagree with him on what he did. I totally disagreed with him on what he did. Very importantly, you had hundreds of thousands of people come to Washington. They didn't come because of me. They came because of the election. They thought the election was a rigged election, and that's why they came. Some of those people went down to the Capitol. I said peacefully and patriotically, nothing done wrong at all, nothing done wrong. And action was taken, strong action. Ashley Babbitt was killed. Nobody was killed. There were no guns down there. We didn't have guns. The others had guns, but we didn't have guns. And when I say we, these are people that walked down. This was a tiny percentage of the overall, which nobody sees and nobody shows. But that was a day of love from the standpoint of the millions. It's like hundreds of thousands. It could have been the largest group I've ever spoken before. They asked me to speak. I went and I spoke. And I used the term peacefully and patriotically. If you look at the Democrats, what they say.
Well, stop right there.
Stop right there.
Waters, I mean, this obviously this is total BS. You can see it for yourself.
I don't think that guy is going to vote for Trump. Look at his face.
I don't.
No.
He's not winning him over. I mean, it's a complete recharacterization of what happened that day. Yeah. And I will remind everyone that Trump was tweeting or Xing or whatever, saying on his Truth Social, "Come to Washington on this date. It's going to be wild." Those are his words. The revisionist nature of Trump's remarks, just crazy.
Yeah.
So that was Trump on Univision, and he took a little bit of that kind of question where there were some headwinds, but then Trump handles it all with, both the filibuster and, and pivoting and making stuff up completely.
I saw a guy. Oh, go ahead.
There's another Univision thing, I think, which kind of calls Trump out on his the Haitians eating the pets and whatever. And you want to run it now? We'll run it now.
Yeah, let's do it.
I think it's pretty good, and then I'll get to Kamala Harris. So he's being
republicano, pero
in Spanish.
En este momento me encuentro indeciso.
He lives in Arizona, Rio Rico,
I am a registered
Arizona.
Republican, but at this time I am undecided.
Durante la campaña se han utilizado muchas teorías de conspiración.
During the campaign, there has been some conspiracy theories in use.
Le doy un ejemplo si me permite.
If you allow me, I would like to give an example of it.
Las autoridades de Springfield, Ohio, han aclarado una y otra vez que los haitianos no se están comiendo los perros ni los gatos de sus gentes.
The authorities in Springfield, Ohio have more than one time clarified that the Haitians are not eating their cats and their dogs.
Sin embargo, usted les quiere revocar su permiso que tienen para residir legalmente en este país.
Nonetheless, you want to revoke the permit they have to legally reside in this country.
Mi pregunta con todo respeto es si usted verdaderamente cree que estas personas se comen las mascotas de la gente.
My question to you very respectfully is, do you really believe that these people are eating the people's pets?
Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. And this was just reported. I was just saying what was reported. That's been reported. And eating other things, too, that they're not supposed to be. But this is, all I do is report. I have not, I was there. I'm going to be there. And we're going to take a look. And I'll give you a full report when I do. But that's been in the newspapers and reported pretty broadly. I will say this as far as Springfield is concerned, because I do know that situation. You have a city of 50.
Stop right here, Tony. I'm just going to say, so you went with an incendiary statement about how they're eating pets and dogs, but it's just something that you say was reported. By the way, it wasn't reported. It was completely concocted. And you're saying, now I'm going to go check it out and I'll let you know what I find. Now you're going to say that? It was a month ago you started this BS, and it actually brought a community that has legitimate problems handling a lot of the infrastructure associated with the influx of people. It brought that community to its knees to the point that the mayor had to beg you to stop with this stuff, and you still didn't stop. So now you're saying you're going to go check it out to see if it's legit. It's just crazy what the shape-shifting that he does. Please continue, Tony.
Well, and they've added almost 30,000 migrants into the city. If you were a person that lived there,
stop again, please. That's not accurate. Kim, how many Haitians have now been added to the city of Springfield, Ohio?
Thank you for asking, Mark. According to the Springfield News Sun, they think that at 15 to 20,000.
Thank you.
The population of Springfield is 58,000.
Don't get me wrong. That many people can still stress city services, and they were stressed and are stressed in some ways. But again, let's not pull facts out of our butt, which is sadly the only place that this gentleman gets his facts. Go right ahead, please, Tony, and then we'll finish up.
In Springfield, Ohio, and all of a sudden you couldn't get into a hospital, you couldn't get your children into a school, you wouldn't be able to buy groceries, you could no longer pay the rent because the government's paying rent. Any of that, if any of that happened, it would be a disaster for you, and you wouldn't be happy. We want to make our people safe and secure, and we want to make them happy. But Springfield, Ohio is a perfect example. You have a town, a beautiful little town with no problems. All of a sudden, they have 30 or 32,000 people dropped into the town.
Now it's up to 32,000. Stop right there. First of all, it wasn't a beautiful little town with no problems, sir. It was a beautiful little town that actually was struggling in many ways, and the influx of immigrants helped revive the town. All of a sudden, they were actually building the economic engines to have a thriving community, and they did. And then the over-influx of immigrants stressed some of those existing systems, that infrastructure associated with hospitals and education, et cetera. So that's That's a fair point. These things have to be handled in some kind of way that accommodates that influx. But this cartoonish way in which Trump suggests a narrative is just, it's offensive. And you can see him skipping from one made-up fact to the other. That's Donald Trump and Univision. I wanted to start with that. Now to Kamala Harris. Sorry, go ahead.
Quickly, what he says next is they come to this country and they don't speak the language.
Oh yeah, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to bail before that. I'm short on time.
He just used a translator.
Go ahead, run that. It is. Yeah, he just.
What? a
This
town,
guy just used. Yeah, go ahead.
beautiful little town with no problems. All of a sudden, they have 30 or 32,000 people dropped into the town, most of whom don't speak the language. Most of whom don't speak the language at all.
Can you imagine that, sir?
And what
Not
they're
speaking
doing
the
is they're
language?
looking all over for interpreters. Well, I mean, I think you can't just destroy our country. It's maybe some people disagree with me, but you can't put in a very short period of time 32,000 people into a 50,000 people town and expect things to go well. It's a disaster.
Yeah. Un desastre. Es un desastre, señor. Yeah. Imagine. They do not speak the English. All right. This is quickly from Luis, and then I'll give you some Kamala Harris. Help me, because I can't really see it in this.
It says irony, the same MAGA clowns who criticize Harris for not being specific enough with policy celebrate Dancing Donnie dancing to November Rain for 39 minutes.
Yeah, that was pretty crazy.
That
was pretty. That was on. Thank you for that, Luis. I agree. The dude is starting to step off the curb even more than normal, and his accusations and his wild actions really speak to, I think, sort of a diminished sense of what's going on up there. I do want to get to Bob Christian, and I'm going to ask that he just wait for another second, because I do want to also touch on Kamala Harris. It was the yang to Trump's yin yesterday. So Trump did that Univision thing. He also did a softball thing that we talked about at Fox, where he was speaking before women, and it was a loaded audience with a bunch of Trump supporters. They were already big supporters of Trump. Meanwhile, Harris went to Fox. Now, remember, I would say that this interview existed in a context that one has to remember. Brett Baier was already getting a hard time, and Fox was, for even entertaining Kamala Harris in a sit-down. They were getting, how can you give her a platform? And so there was already that sort of incoming fire. And Brett Baier, was getting plaudits afterwards for, being all over her. I mean, talking about within the building, within the Fox building. In other words, the more you pound on Kamala Harris, the more high fives you'll get from the community that is anti-Kamala Harris and is pro-GOP, in this case, raising up Donald Trump. So he got plenty of high fives for mauling Kamala Harris, or trying to, the way he did. But I think in a broader community looking in, I don't know that stuff plays so well, that when you cut her off, you don't let her answer a question. I mean, there was you can say with respect all you want, but the reality is you're not showing any respect to a sitting vice president who I'd say deserves maybe a modicum of respect beyond what the average sit-down interviewee might get. You're not even giving that sitting vice president that modicum of respect and asking the tough questions. You're all over her, cutting her off. It was a hit job. And I thought under those circumstances, Harris did well. Harris, and I will say this also, she does her own bit of killing the clock and of filibustering, and that's what politicians do. So before you get too tough on her, remember, that's kind of the dance. It's what J.D. Vance does. It's what Trump does. It's what Harris does. They speak. They don't really answer the question. They pivot to something that they want to talk about, and then they filibuster. And you saw a lot of that with Kamala Harris. But I thought she beat back that onslaught that was associated with Brett Baier pretty well. Quickly, a little clip. I believe this is this contrasts this question about the border as it was asked on Fox with the way it really played and with what Trump really said. So Go ahead. I think this is all included in this clip, and then I'll get to Bob, who's waiting patiently in Georgia. Go ahead, Tony, please.
How many illegal immigrants would you estimate your administration has released into the country over the last 3.5 years?
Well, I'm glad you raised the issue of immigration because I agree with you. It is a topic of discussion that people want to rightly have. And you know what I'm going to talk about.
Yeah, but
right
do you,
now,
just a
which
number.
is-
Do you think it's 1 million, 3 million?
Brett, let's just get to the point. Okay, the point is that we have a broken immigration system that needs to be repaired.
So your Homeland Security Secretary said that 85% of apprehensions.
I'm not finished. We have
It's a
an
rough
immigration
estimate of
system
6 million people
that
have been
needs to be-
released into the country. And let me just finish. I'll get to the question, I promise.
She got one sentence out and it was all
And
over.
when you came into office, your administration immediately reversed a number of Trump border policies. Most significantly, the policy that required illegal immigrants to be detained through deportation, either in the U.S. or in Mexico. And you switched that policy. They were released from custody awaiting trial. So instead, included in those were a large number of single men, adult men, who went on to commit heinous crimes. So, looking back, do you regret the decision to terminate Remain in Mexico at the beginning of your administration?
At the beginning of our administration, within practically hours of taking the oath, the first bill that we offered Congress, before we worked on infrastructure, before the Inflation Reduction Act, before the Chips and Science Act, before the bipartisan Safer Communities Act, the first bill, practically within hours of taking the oath, was a bill to fix our immigration system.
Yes, ma'am. It was called the U.S. Citizenship Act of 2021.
Exactly.
It was essentially a pathway to
may I
citizenship for
please
the...
finish?
Yes, ma'am.
May I finish responding, please?
But
you have to let me finish,
You
please.
had the White House and the House and the Senate,
I'm
and they
in the
didn't bring
middle
up
of
that bill.
responding to the point you're raising,
Okay.
and I'd like to finish.
Yes, ma'am.
We recognized from day one that, to the point of this being your first question, it is a priority for us as a nation and for the American people. And our focus has been on fixing a problem. And from day one, then, we have done a number of things, including to address our asylum system and put more resources, getting more judges, what we needed to do to tighten up penalties and increase penalties for illegal crossings, what we needed to do to deal with points of entry between border entry points. That's the work we did, and we worked on supporting what was a bipartisan effort, including some of the most conservative members of the United States Congress, to actually strengthen the border. That border bill would have put 1,500 more border agents at the border, which is why I believe the Border Patrol agents supported the bill. It would have allowed us to stem the flow of fentanyl coming into the United States, which is a scourge affecting people of every background, every geographic location in our country, killing people. It would have allowed us to put more resources into prosecuting transnational criminal organizations, which I have done as the Attorney General, former Attorney General of a border state.
Madam Vice President, a couple of things.
Prosecuted trafficking of drugs, guns, and human beings. And Donald Trump, but let me just finish.
6 Democrats voted against that bill.
Learned about that bill and told them to kill it because he preferred to run on a problem instead of fixing a problem. And in this election, this is rightly a discussion that the American people want to have. And what they want are solutions, and they want a president of the United States who's not playing political games with the issue,
I hear you.
but actually is focused on fixing
6
it.
Democrats voted against that bill. It would have allowed 1.8 million illegal immigrants into the country a year. A lot of conservatives had a problem with it. These are the 6 Democrats. But more importantly, back to the original premise, Jocelyn Nungari, Rachel Morin, Laken Riley, they are young women who were brutally assaulted and killed by some of the men who were released at the beginning of the administration, well before.
This is where I thought, stop for a second, and I'll play this out, and then I'll get to Bob. This is where I thought she handled it well in a sense, but I thought you could really have handled it in a far more aggressive way. This is what they're doing on the stump. They are showing you these people who have tragically lost their lives to illegal immigrant crime, as they put on the screen there. Okay, at some point, we need to stop what is an offensive use of these sweet souls who have lost their lives for political purposes. Yeah. We have to stop the use of their loss of life for pure political purposes. And it's a naked political play that these sweet souls are used by the Trump campaign and by you here at Fox to dramatize some point that you're making. You've made it over and over and over again, but to have their faces flashed on screens, to have them constantly mentioned, is offensive and grotesque and wrong. And even as we mourn their loss, that use of them that way is a political football kind of approach to politics that is unacceptable. She could have said some version of that. Maybe that would have been too heavy, but here's what she said. Go ahead.
Bipartisan bill. Former President Clinton actually referred to Laken Riley Sunday campaigning for you in Georgia, saying if those men had been properly vetted, Laken Riley probably would not have been killed. So if it wouldn't have happened, this is well before any negotiation. This is well before Donald Trump got involved in the politics. This is a specific policy decision by your administration to release these men into the country. So what I'm saying to you, do you owe
Brett,
those families an apology?
Let me just say, first of all, those are tragic cases. There's no question about that. There's no question about that. And I can't imagine the pain that the families of those victims have experienced for a loss that should not have occurred. So that is true. It is also true that if a border security had actually been passed 9 months ago, it would be 9 months that we would have had more border agents at the border, more support for the folks who are working around the clock trying to hold it all together.
Madam Vice President.
To ensure that no future harm would occur. And this election in 20 days will determine whether we have a president of the United States who actually cares more about fixing a problem, even if it is not to their political advantage in an election, because there was a solution, Brett.
Madam Vice President, it was a policy decision in the early part of your administration. I will let
stop it. I've heard enough, but she made the key point there was, hey, Brett, here's the deal. If your guy really cared about these lives, if you really cared about the border, he would not have KO'd this border bipartisan, essentially it was a GOP crafted immigration bill. He KO'd it because it was not to his political advantage to have any kind of solution to address this problem. So you can pretend that you guys care about it, and Trump can pretend, and you can put these sweet souls' faces on screen again. But the reality is you don't really care about it. That's the fraud of this. If you cared about it, you would have passed that immigration bill, which was going to pass until Trump interceded. So you don't really care. And you know who should apologize? You. Fox News Channel and Donald Trump should apologize for not stemming the tide at the border when they had the chance with the bipartisan immigration bill, not having all those additional immigration judges, not addressing with so many policies that would address and speak to the flow of immigrants across the border, specifically, for example, buffing up the number of Border Patrol down there. So I think something along those lines, you could have turned that. You could have, again, mourn the loss, but then turn and say, using those people as propaganda politically is offensive. And it also is a fraud because Donald Trump and you at Fox News don't really care about immigration. Because if you did, you wouldn't have been part of supporting Trump in KOing that immigration bill. More on this later. I've got Bob Christian waiting. Thank you for your thoughts. What do we have here? I can't see the chats from on my remote location here. I see what is it, Kim?
Asbjørn Knudsen with 50. Is it
Kroner?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Kamala smoked Fox News, says Asbjørn. Trump seemed like an ignorant dotard in a slightly critical interviews. Best wishes from Norway. We love USA as a democracy.
I love it. Love my Norway.
Kim, how are you?
Yeah, all right. Thank you. Ashburn. And thank you, Norway. Right on. All right.
The Mark Thompson Show.
More on that in the last half hour of the show. Right now, we speak to somebody who we promised we'd touch base with, and I certainly didn't promise him that we'd make him wait so long. Running for Congress out of the state of Georgia. How about it for Bob Christian, everybody? Look at you. Congratulations on making it this far. Make sure you're unmuted so we can hear you. I saw the first. Remind everybody where District 7 is, which is where you're running there in the state of Georgia.
Oh, gladly. And thank you for having me back, Mark. I truly appreciate it. And there was absolutely no problem waiting back in the wings because I hate to say it, but it's always entertaining to watch half of these candidates run for Congress. It's some of the most fun that you can have today to listen to the stuff that comes out of one person's mouth compared to the other. And I wanted to real quick touch on the Haitian segment that you were doing, because one thing that nobody talks about in the press, nobody talks about, period, is that twice, not just once, but twice, the temporary protected status for those very immigrants in Springfield, Ohio, came up under the Trump administration and was renewed. And so this is an issue that shouldn't surprise them. This is an issue that shouldn't be like, oh my God, they're in Springfield. They authorized that. They reauthorized that. They kept that program in place. So, I mean, whether or not this is a circumstance that is actually disastrous for Springfield, they kept it there. They knew it was there, and they kept it there, and they don't want to talk about that part of it. And
Such a great point. That's really a terrific point. Thank you. There's a lot of stuff like that, stuff that was going on already during the Trump administration, and now they're just trying to tag Harris with everything that happened under Biden's watch as well. So yeah, remind everybody where the District 7 is, and then we can.
North Georgia. So I'm down here in North Georgia. I'm just down the road from the Lake and Riley incident you talked about. I also want to point out that there have been a dozen murders since that moment that have all been committed by American citizens, and we're not hearing about any of those. And so this is exactly to your point, a political emphasis on trying to create a problem that was a problem that they made a problem.
Sure.
And it's, but I'm in North Georgia. It is Lumpkin County, Forsyth County, Dawson County, Cherokee County, a little bit of Hall County, a little bit of Fulton County. So think northwest Atlanta and then north from there.
Okay.
And so it's
okay.
the upper part.
Now, I always hear that that part of Georgia is, very. And please pardon me, I say this with respect, and I'm such a, an urbanite that, I mean, I could go down there and probably fake it for a day and a half maybe, but people would kind of realize, hey, this guy isn't the real thing. That there's sort of okay, so here's the cartoonish version of outside of Atlanta when you just get the rest of Georgia. It's like Beverly Hillbillies kind of thing. But it's not. I think that can't possibly be the way it is, because when I talk to you and others I know in Georgia, they don't strike me as Beverly Hillbillies.
No, but I do understand why people think that. In fact, I get that in my own district a little bit, because the southern half of my district, that port that's closer to Atlanta, much more urban, much more developed, much more kind of city type environment, an urban environment, if you will. And then you cross into the northern few counties of my district and go further north from there, you're in cattle country, you're in horse country. You're in farming country. We've got a lot of bee farms out here, oddly. We've got chicken farms. We've got horse farms. We've got cattle farms. Agriculture is the number one industry in the state of Georgia. And so when you get outside that bubble that is Atlanta, you get outside that bubble that is Savannah, you get outside that bubble that is Augusta, you're in very rural territory. And it creates this stark contrast between the type of people that I want to represent. And one of the most common questions I get is from my constituents down in Roswell, down in the Atlanta area. They'll ask me directly. They'll be like, what do I have in common with somebody that lives up in North Georgia cattle country? Because I live down here in the big city. And for our district, even though it is gerrymandered, I think we talked a little bit about that the last time I was here. It was written very specifically so that Republicans in the state could win it. In fact, it was written very specifically so the man that holds the office could win it. Least American district in the United States of America, because they openly said, here's your congressional district, sir. And it's, but the thing that they have in common is that the central corridor of the district, literally, it begins in Atlanta, it terminates in Lumpkin County, it runs directly north to south through the center of the district, is what's known as the Highway 400 corridor. It's State Highway 400. It is the fastest growing economic corridor in the state of Georgia, quite possibly one of the fastest. In fact, on the map, it's that bright line that goes right down where the 19 is from Roswell up through. And that's an older map. That's not an accurate recreation of the district. It's going to be tough for you to find a good one, Kim, because they've changed it 4 times in the last 6 years. It's
that's the game they play with these House races. It's so very hard.
It's amazing what's happening down here in Georgia.
So, Bob, what is the stuff that you campaign on? It's interesting, we just showed the clips, and obviously a centerpiece of that, you can call it interview. I'd call it like it was almost like a gangland hit that they put on Kamala Harris last night on Fox. The centerpiece was immigration, because they think they can really gain some political points with immigration. So you had that question sliced and diced a million different ways. But what is the stuff that resonates and lands with your constituency or your potential constituency?
The absolute biggest issue in North Georgia at the moment is women's rights. The absolute biggest issue in North Georgia at the moment. And I happen to think it's the biggest issue across the country. It's a centerpiece of my campaign because it comes down to how you define rights. It comes down to how you define freedom in this case. And for me, it strikes all the way back. This is an argument we've been having since damn near day one here in the United States, is what defines freedom and who gets to be free. And the best way I've ever heard it put was when Frederick Douglass stood up before a group of white human beings in North America, the northern part of the United States, right around the verges of the Civil War, and said, "I stand before you a thief and a robber. I have stolen this head, these arms, these legs, these limbs, to come and speak before you tonight." And the speech that he went on to give talked about the importance of being free as in being in control of your own self. If you don't have bodily autonomy, if you don't have control of your own person, then you're not free. It doesn't matter what way you define freedom. You're not free if you don't have control of your own self. And at the moment, very suddenly, women in this nation are being pulled backwards from that freedom. For 50 years, they had a great set of rules in Roe v. Wade that balanced both their personal privacy, personal autonomy with the concerns of society, because at some point, society does get to be concerned about the people in its society. And Roe v. Wade balanced that out perfectly. Perfectly.
It's fascinating to me that does land so well, because I think on some level within the media's voracious appetite for the next story, and it's just such a short attention span that we have, there is an odd thing that's happened, which is that we've forgotten, and again, I'm just looking at sort of mainstream media coverage and just what's out there in the zeitgeist generally, we've forgotten this horrifying decision and the fraud that preceded it by, that settled law, we'd never touch it, all of this thing that Kavanaugh said, that Coney Barrett said, that, what's his name, who's I forget, the guy who preceded them, his mom ran the EPA under Bush. Anyway, point is, this is as you suggested, landmark decision that takes away a substantial right from these people, women, who make up the lion's share of the country, and somehow it doesn't still get into the zeitgeist the way it did when it first went down. So I'm getting to, with a lengthy preamble, to the point, which is when I see the first day, and this very much applies to you, the first day of voting in Georgia, breaking records in Atlanta and in the Georgia rolls, never has there been the kind of showing as there was in the first day of Georgia voting. It tells me something is animating that one issue, I suspect, and it ain't immigration. And I'm guessing you're onto something. It is indeed, it's Roe v. Wade and that overturn.
I think it is, yeah. I think it is definitely that. We had 328,000 people cast an early vote on the very first day of early voting here in Georgia. The previous record was 162,000, so we doubled it. We doubled it. And no one's truly surprised about that. Both parties have been coming out with strong rhetoric. I've said it a million times myself, is vote early and then go to the Secretary of State site and make sure your vote counts, because there's some weird shenanigans about voting here in the state. But the Republican Party has been doing the same thing for their people. Vote early, make sure that counts, go as soon as you can, have a plan. And I think we're seeing the results of that. But the fascinating news, the incredible news that is coming out of these numbers, because yesterday we crossed 500,000 voters. I think today we're going to push about 750,000. And I think by the end of the week, tomorrow, we're going to be over 1 million people have cast an early vote here in the state of Georgia. It's an incredible turnout. But 10% of those voters are voters that have not ever cast a vote before in the state of Georgia.
So to follow up then, it's interesting you kind of hint at it. The GOP also is trying to get their people out. Trump's message, very different than the message he had the last time, which was sort of, this is crazy. I don't know why anybody votes by mail. I don't know why anybody votes early. You know, why can't we just vote on election day, et cetera. Now it's go out, vote early. So the basic historical touchstone on early voting is that it's a Democratic push, okay? And you sort of hinted that you think it generally is, but you've also noted what I was just saying, which is that Trump has emphasized early voting. So when you kind of try to handicap all of that, you still think it's likely a huge Democratic surge or with a taste of Republican, or do you think it might be more of a clean mix percentage-wise?
That's an excellent question. That's actually the $1 million question, because it's, I mean, if you pull a room together of Democratic pundits, they're going to tell you that Democrats vote early, that when we see a huge surge in early voting, it can only be good for Democrats. And so we'll never know what the numbers are going to mean until we get to election day and see the surge on the same day voting. When you talk to Republican pollsters, they're saying that our turnout the vote machine has worked really incredibly well, and that's what you're seeing is this new surge of Republican voters. And I don't think either one of them quite have it right. I kind of liked what you said about a Democratic flair with a taste of Republican in it. It's I know that this district, the 7th district here in Georgia, is one of the most diversifying, fastest growing districts in the United States. We are seeing a huge increase in young people that are voting for the first time. I spent a couple hours last night with a large group of those folks, and they're excited and they're all in and they want to see change. They have a different set of issues than your general voter, but they are looking to find out where they can make an impact. They're going to be huge. But it's these people in the neighborhoods. When I first started doing polling data around my county, Dawson County, it is the lowest population county in the district. Out of the 765,000 people in my district, there are only about 30,000 of them in Dawson County. But Dawson County is the microcosm for what's about to happen in this region. You were talking earlier under the Haitian immigration bit about how you bring in an influx of people and it puts pressure on a system. Well, we're not bringing anybody from anywhere per se. We're just growing. People are just moving here as they move out of the growing city. As it's just that natural progression of growth that comes in a healthy economy. Well, Dawsonville's 5-year plan was based around the idea that 5 years from now, we would have 35,000 people in the district or in the county. Now, very suddenly, we're anticipated to have 50,000 people in the county by 5 years. And of course, that's a huge, huge increase in growth that the county's not prepared to handle. We don't have the tax base to move from 28,000 to 50,000. We don't have the roads to move from 28,000 to 50,000. All those things that were stressed in Springfield, Ohio by this influx of immigration is what's happening across the 7th district of the United States, or at least of Georgia, because of just natural growth, of just people living here and growing and becoming better and being attracted to success. And
so you don't ascribe that surge in those coming into your area as an immigration push. You're saying it's just the natural evolution?
Yeah, no, we do have some immigration. We have one of the largest and fastest growing AAPI communities here in North Georgia, but that's not what's driving the growth. The honest answer is what's driving the growth is it is impossible to find an affordable place to live in the city of Atlanta. And so people are coming further and further and further away from Atlanta to find somewhere to live. And the commute going back into that city has become god awful. It really, truly has. And all the things that we complain about with growth. I mean, we complain about our streets are clogged. We complain about that it's hard for our police to get around, our ambulance to get around, our firefighters to get around. All of that, we have the opportunity right now in the 7th district to start working on if we had a federal representative that was willing to tap into the dollars available under that entire list of things that Kamala Harris just mentioned in the Fox interview. There are literally billions of dollars available for infrastructure projects, for park and city rec projects, for rebuilding fire departments, for rebuilding police departments, for adding to medical care. All the things that you need to grow, the secondary and tertiary services that need to grow with a population. And that money is there, and that ability is there. It just takes a representative at the congressional level willing to walk across the hall and say, hey, Mr. Appropriations Committee guy, I need some appropriations. And our representative is not doing that. $0 in appropriations over the last 2 years when we have seen an increase of about 12% population in this district. Zero. Doesn't care. Voted down FEMA funding, and not our district wasn't impacted by that, but our state was. The Southeast was.
And that was a straight party vote, in other words. That's the reason he went against FEMA. Wow. I mean, I got to think that people are beginning to have had enough about this. How are you trending, Bob? Have you gotten any sort of early sense of where you are in this race? It's an uphill slug, I would think.
Oh, it is an uphill slug. No, it's I was definitely the underdog coming into the race, and that I'm used to that. I was the underdog when I started this campaign a few years ago for the 6th district. They changed the numbers, so now I'm for the 7th district, but it's the same piece of earth. And it is a deep red district. Like I said, it was drawn very specifically to hand it to one man. It is what I call the least American congressional district in the United States, because they didn't open it up for any competition. My opponent has not once agreed to meet with me in public. He has not once answered any of the charges I've made about his policy decisions or his personal decisions in public. He is running as if I'm not there, completely and utterly running as if there are no such things as Democrats in the 7th.
Because he knows the fix is in, really, in this case. Yeah.
It's they all thought that was the case last time around, and they drew a 60-40 district, and I did take that 40%. It was kind of unexpected for him because they didn't think a Democrat would step up. And I'm polling higher than the 40% this time around. And my goal when I came into this race this time, obviously I'm in it to win it. I mean, that's the phrase, that's the reason. And you don't do this without the idea that you can win that seat. And there is an opportunity for us to win that seat this cycle right now, right here. But the honest, real answer is it's probably going to take another crack at this. It might take another shot at the title. And that's fine. I'm in that for the long haul. But right now, very suddenly, because of that weird 10% of people that have never voted before, that's enough to swing it. That's enough to wake up surprised on November 6th, which I think a lot of people are going to do. I think a ton of people are going to wake up on November 6th and be like, holy crap, what just happened yesterday? And I hope to be one of them. I really, truly do. But the honest answer to your question is that I'm anticipating I'm going to come in about 44-45%. Which here in North Georgia is remarkable. And I will not take away from anything that my team has done, anything that my candidates have done, anything that my campaign has done. If we can hit that mark, if we can pull in at the 45% mark, then next time when we run this, we'll very suddenly have that national support that we need.
I love to hear that. And I love that you look at the long haul, because I think politics and change often is incremental.
Mm-hmm.
I know this from other movements I'm part of. We kind of have to settle for incremental movement, and everybody hates it. And progressives really hate. I mean, you don't please live under the progressive label. I'm just using it as an example. They can't. There's a purity test. You know, they hate Biden, they hate Harris, they hate. I mean, because nobody can live up to the, this purity test. And I just think that on some level, you have to accept incremental change. Sad as it is, that is the way it works. Politics is a long fight. Change is an evolution that takes a lot of time. And Bob, you say all the right things. I'd love to have you back even after this race is concluded to just occasionally weigh in on stuff. You're such a smart guy, and you deserve to. Yeah,
and I would love to come back. I want to touch on something that you just said, though, about the incremental change, about the moving forward on that. It's you have to also see the change while it's happening. Our campaign here in Georgia has been going spectacularly well, and I want to use this last week as an example of why. And these are going to be small numbers. All of your listeners, especially out in that direction, out on the West Coast, you've got huge crowds that come out for these events. You've got big political movements that happen. You see rallies with tens of thousands of people. You've got the stadiums and places to put them. We don't. We're a tiny series of rural towns in the north, huge gatherings in the south, very Democratic down south, very Republican up north. And over the last week, we gathered 50 people in Dawson County, Georgia, in a park to meet with Senator John Ossoff. And Senator John Ossoff came to Dawson, Georgia, of all places on the planet, and emphasized the principles and ideals that we believe in. And we brought out a crowd of people to come and talk to him. From that moment, I traveled with the senator to Canton, Georgia, which is in the deep red Cherokee County. And it is a county, again, that is growing and changing, but 300 people filled a building to come hear us say what we have to say and to encourage them to go out and make change. And then the next week, we opened up an office in the same place, and another 300 people showed up in the downtown deep red district. We had 400 people standing on 3 different street corners to cheer and razz the former president as he drove through Forsyth, Georgia, to that weird Fox News thing that he did just recently with the women. It's tiny numbers, 300 people, 400 people, 50 people. But my goodness sakes, to do that in the middle of deep red Georgia, where people are actually afraid to say they're Democrats, that's the change we're making. That's the network we're building. Because next cycle, when something comes up and we need people to come out, we've already got 50 to start with. Let's just grow from there. We've already got 300 to start with. We grow from there. And so that's the work we're doing. It's like I said, I think a lot of people are going to wake up surprised November 6th. I think I've got a legitimate shot to win this thing this cycle. But
I love it. Bob Christian, he's
the work we're doing. The work we're doing is going to lead to victory down the road.
Well, I mean, and it's a great, it seems like it's righteous work at that. The congressional candidate for District 7 is Bob Christian, Christian 4GA7.
And I see the website on the screen. Thank you so much for that.
Yeah.
So I also see my staff has made some changes to that.
Christian4GA7.com. Bob Christian. Love your takes, love our visits, and I want them to continue regardless of what happens, but I wish you luck and hope that you actually get victory in a race that they have made so very difficult for anyone else to win. So thanks, Bob.
It's amazing what they've done down here.
It's good old-fashioned, I mean, Southern politics, but it's,
can I steal 1 minute before I leave? I want to steal
real
1
quick
minute before I leave, because I wanted to update everybody. I know last time we talked about the actions of our state election board. And
yeah, please. Yeah, because there was just a major announcement by that judge in Georgia. Go ahead, please. Yeah.
Yeah, just as of yesterday, we've had a series of 2 cases in a row, and none of those rules were deemed to be accurate rules. They have all been thrown out. The hand counting rule, the you have a reasonable thing. And I wanted to just say that that's the judicial system that we have here in Georgia, and that's why I wasn't too terribly concerned about what was the end result. But I want everybody to be aware of what they're doing to get there. Because now, in several states, they've launched an attack on overseas ballot, which is how our military votes. And they're saying somehow that those are illegitimate. And so it's everybody needs to be truly aware that this is a plot, this is a plan, this is a scheme to cast doubt on our fair, free election system. An election system has carried us for 250 years. Is it perfect? No. But does it work? Yes. And everything they're doing is trying to make you think that it doesn't, so that when they stand up and go, it's just not fair, it's not because their policies are crap, it's because our system is. They are losing because their policies are crap. And we need to just keep that at the forefront of our minds. Thank you so much for having me, Mark. I truly appreciate it.
Yeah, of course, Bob. We'll see you again soon. Great closing remarks, and I look forward to the next conversation. Thanks. Bob Christian, everybody. See you, Bob. Wow.
The Mark Thompson Show.
He's so smart. I'd love to continue to get him into the mix as we continue. A couple of people in his district watching the show, which is wild. Maybe I don't know how they heard about it, but it's cool. There is, I guess, there's also a lot
of the folks in his district. We'll put this video out later with just Bob Christian. Take it and share it in your district. Please send it around.
There you go. Yeah, Bob, take that video, use it any way you want. We are, of course, running behind. I'm in San Francisco, California. We're here for the SF Fall Show. I recommend it to all of you. It's $20 to get in with our discount code, and I'm going back down there today with Courtney. It's right on the bay at Fort Mason in what's called the Festival Pavilion, and it's so much fun. We had a great time previewing it last night, and I really encourage you to check it out. We'll be there at 3:30 today. If you go today at 3:30 to the SF Fall Show, again, it's sffallshow.org, but you can buy tickets right at the door and use our discount code at the door. It's just Mark. Say the name Mark. But if you're using it at their website, sffallshow.org, then capital letters MARK, also at eventbrite.com, and again, use the code MARK in capital letters. But the show's going through Sunday. It's at Fort Mason. As I say, if you go at 3:30 today, email the show, and no matter where we are there, we'll come say hi to you there at the front. And the email for the show is themarkthompsonshow@gmail.com. Not Mark Thompson Show at gmail, but themarkthompsonshow@gmail.com. So that's why I'm in San Francisco, and that's why we'll be here for the rest of the week. We're which is one more day.
The Mark Thompson Show.
But Thursdays bring a guy into our midst who is remarkable. Across the English-speaking world, his legal analysis is used and is appreciated. I'm talking about New Zealand to Australia to the States to England and Great Britain at large. How about it for the former federal prosecutor, now defense attorney, David Katz, everyone.
Great to be with you, Mark. You look
Hello,
terrific
sir.
up there.
Thank you. Love San Francisco, and it's great to be in the Bay Area. Look, there's a lot going on. We mentioned that case in Georgia just a moment ago, the judge saying, hey, mandatory hand counting of the ballots, and he essentially threw out all of these different tactics that were being used by the GOP to gum up the works in Georgia. You may have a thought on that. I don't know if you do, and then I can get to some of the other,
I do. I thought the ruling was very judicious because he said, look, I don't need to really get to the merits of this at this point, but you did it so late. It's going to really monkey with the election. It's going to be too hard to deal with at the election coming up in 3 weeks. So I'm going to think about it some more, and the appellate court can think about it if it wants to. But my ruling right now is that this will not go into effect, either the hand count or this so-called reasonable inquiry. He also made a ruling in the reasonable inquiry. The hand count is that you don't have to hand count. The idea was that you would open up these ballots, these results, sealed results that are done by the computer, that are done all the ways that have been proven to be proper. And then you would open them up by hand in 5,000 different precincts throughout Georgia, and you would hand count them, besides being very time consuming. As even Raffensperger said, remember, he's the elections chief down there, the one who stood up to Trump. He said, this is a prescription for fraud, delay, a mess. The other ruling that the judge made was the reasonable inquiry, also made by that same board that's in power. It has 3 Trump members out of its 5 marked down there. And those 3 decided that they could, on their own, in their own discretion, the board, do a reasonable inquiry as to whether there had been fraud, whether there'd been some problem. And everyone said, oh, we get it. In the name of preventing fraud, they're going to actually commit fraud, delay, and putting a pro-Trump finger on the scale, because if the results came in Trump's way, that would be great. But if they were coming in not Trump's way, there would need to be a reasonable inquiry. And that would produce this real Pandora's box, Mark, because then they wouldn't certify within the week, which they have to certify. The whole state couldn't certify because all these precincts were lagging behind doing their so-called reasonable inquiry, which wasn't even defined in the statute. And then Georgia would just not report its results. Imagine if the state was leaning toward Harris. The other states were very close. With Georgia went the election, and then Georgia was not reporting because of these 3 people controlling this 5-person board. They would delay it. Instead of seeing on Associated Press, Harris wins, delays, count, big mess. Maybe Congress has to get involved. So the judge, I think, absolutely did the right thing. Just to finish the point, they can appeal at this point to the Court of Appeal down there in Georgia. But it seems like this is the end of this ride before the election, and they will not be able to monkey with the vote down there in Georgia. A very last thing, there was a record turnout the first day that they could actually vote, by mail. There was an enormous record-breaking vote by mail. You figure it's probably because there's huge turnout. It's for Harris, and the most beautiful vote of all of them was Jimmy Carter's.
Yeah, indeed. He said he wanted to live to vote for Harris this time around at age 100. Just to put a point on that, this strategy of monkeying with things such that you slow them down and you just throw sand into the gears of the vote and the election, that is the GOP strategy now in key swing states particularly, so that you can't reach the Electoral College threshold and neither candidate will have it. And in that way, there's a chaos about who's won the election, and then it goes and is thrown ultimately to Congress, which is overwhelmingly, because it's just 1 vote per state, favoring GOP, and then Trump ascends to the presidency. That's the strategy. It may feel like a long shot, since it certainly doesn't have a lot of historical precedent in past elections, but it is the articulated strategy on some level. Now, please go ahead.
It's also in the Constitution, and it would end up going to the House and they would vote by state delegations, and there are 26, 27, whatever it is, although there are, even if the Congress went Democratic, now maybe they could cure that if it goes Democratic before January 6th. But the problem is that if they vote by state delegations, there are, let's say, 27 or 28 that are Republican. And that's not by population. That's the same way we got into this problem with the Senate, which is so unrepresentative, where we have the Senate that's, 2 votes for every state. And so Wyoming has the same 2 votes that California has. And one last thing, Mark, civic pride and a sense of patriotism always prevented this problem. No matter whether you're a Republican or Democrat, you would say, you know what? We'll get them next time. We're going to count the vote. We're responsible people. All of these folks who volunteer to be poll watchers, they're not trying to put their finger on the scale. They're doing their civic duty. This is patriotism. This is what America is all about. And, we've always had this feeling that if the other side wins, we'll get him next time, until Trump came along.
Well, and just to double back to something you just said, it wouldn't matter who controls Congress, the House, that is to say, because it just goes to the states, as you say. It goes one state, one vote. So it wouldn't matter. Republicans in control, Democrats in control. Wouldn't that be the case?
I think that's right, although there is some hope that if it went Democratic, that, they figure Speaker Johnson, if he remains Speaker, has already shown that he doesn't have an inclination to make sure that there's a fair, proper. Every time you ask him, will you count? He answers this, well, yes, if it's fair, which, of course, is another way of saying if I like the results.
Sure.
So
sure.
I think there'd be less mischief if the Democrats were in control of the House on January 6th. I just somehow think there'd be less mischief.
Just as a digression, one of the great things I saw over the weekend was that Johnson that you're talking about, Mike Johnson, who is I get it, he kind of looks like a Tim Kazurinsky in SNL from years ago. He's got that very kind of sort of nerdy, like this guy wouldn't be by the books guy. He's a horrible guy. Okay, he's an alt-right radical election denier who fought tenaciously for Donald Trump, even as Donald Trump had lost the election, and he continues to pursue that election lie. Okay, that's who he is. But on the Kamala Harris medical records, she released her medical records, and Trump, of course, has not released his medical records, hasn't released his college transcript, hasn't released anything, right? But on the medical records, he was going after Kamala Harris because she has some skin condition or something. It's an allergy. It was a long explanation of what really is an allergy, okay? And he was going after it like it could be distracting. She's not going to be able to focus on the work or whatever. It was just total BS. And when asked by the moderator, well, what about Donald Trump? He hasn't released his records. And Harris's view was, what are you talking about? His records are on display every day. You can see how vital a man he is. It was like, wow. This is the tortured logic of the GOP in this case and of Mike Johnson. Just a despicable guy.
Mark, just one last thing, because people either don't remember or don't want to remember all of the foibles and mess ups of the Trump years. But one of the hilarious ones was when he was the greatest health of anyone in America. And he double parked his limousine, I think, ran up to the doctor's office, right? Got a letter from the doctor that he was in great shape and was back in his double parked car within about 10 minutes. And then it turned out that there was some crooked connection with that doctor. It was beyond belief. Allegedly.
Right.
Allegedly, there was a crooked connection with that doctor.
Oh, it's so funny. It was hay fever and occasional hives. Thank you, Teacher Lori. That's exactly what it was. All right. Before I move on, David Katz, I know you wanted to talk about this renewed interest in the Menendez case, and I didn't want our time to completely expire without at least getting to it, so let's get to it early. So Lyle and Eric Menendez are cooling their heels. They've been in prison now for a long time. They committed a brutal act of violence, and they shotgun blasted their parents to death, and then went on to spend some of their parents' money and suggest after the killing, it was never thought that it could be them. After the killing, it was suggested it must have been a gangland hit. Their parents were in debt to the mob. There were a bunch of sort of mob-related phony narratives that were floated until it was Lyle and Eric that were ultimately realized to be the perpetrators. Now, in the, I would suggest sort of revisionist way that you look back on many of these cases, there is a narrative that's been drawn out literally in a drama which dramatizes their case and who they are. And there is a renewed interest in this Menendez case, and even talk that they, as the, quote, victims of abuse, should be eligible for the freedom, for regaining their freedom. And I wonder if you can speak to this entire thing.
Well, it's hard to know where to begin. The case is really old. They've been in prison for 34 years. Both of them have been. It's gotten huge interest because of this Netflix show called Monsters. And on top of that, there's a documentary about it. And the two of them have gotten huge interest. I think it's the most popular show on Netflix, or was for a while. And of course, that's gotten a lot of people interested on social media. A lot of celebrities have gotten involved. Kim Kardashian visited them in prison and she put out a statement. Other people have gotten involved, but the rubber is kind of hitting the road because about a year ago, they made a motion for habeas corpus, which means you're wrongly holding us. And the idea is you're wrongly holding us because we have various remedies or to be released. And so they say one of them is that you didn't put on our, at the time it was derided as the abuse excuse at our second trial. But the rubber's really hitting the road because while that habeas corpus petition for relief was filed about a year ago down here in Los Angeles in state court, we had this huge race, which we talked about, I think, last week or the week before, between the incumbent, George Gascon, a famous progressive prosecutor down here, and he's got an opponent, a former assistant U.S. attorney from my office, Nathan Hochman, who said, you know, this has all gone too far and crime has taken over the city and it's all Gascon's fault. We've been Gasconed down here in LA, he says. And there's about 2 weeks left to go, and he's about 20 points behind in the polls, the incumbent progressive prosecutor is, to Hochman, who not only was an assistant U.S. attorney in my office, but went on to be a fairly high official in the George W. Bush administration. That a high W official is actually 20 points ahead for any office down here in Democratic Los Angeles is remarkable. But this issue of the Lyle and Eric Menendez brothers may become a sort of an October surprise because what position is Gascon going to take on it? And it looks like he's going to be sympathetic to their claims. Now, their claims, Mark, are twofold. One is that they should be resentenced. And the DA has the power to join their motion that they be resentenced. And with the DA joining it, if he does, a judge might very well do it and say, look, even though you got life without parole, there are new circumstances, there's new information, and I'm going to make your sentence one where you could be released pretty promptly. The other one is that they have a retrial. In other words, there's all these allegations back and forth. There's this supposed new evidence. And I don't know how much you want to get into the weeds, but the new evidence is sort of interesting. One is that there was a boy band named Menudo. And one of the stars of Menudo says that when he was young, 14, 15, his manager, the person who could make and maintain his career, was this father, and that this father abused him. Now, that wasn't known at the time, I don't think, but if you believe that there was abuse going on, it's corroboration of the abuse. And then the other thing is that someone who's now dead had a letter. That letter has now been found. My understanding, though, is that that person at the time testified, or there was testimony, Mark, that one of the brothers had communicated to that friend that he was really worried about abuse, that he was being abused. It's a little bit vague, some of the letter, and he says that he can't stand it anymore. It's happening all the time, and his dad is, as I read the letter, overweight. So it's a little ambiguous. But supposedly it was known to the jury that there had been communication from that person. So whether there's actually a letter or not, or there was just communication at the time, in that sense, it was known that one of the boys had expressed at the time fear. And that's consistent with the abuse. So at the
I want to just stop you there for a second because we had a DA from Orange County on. He had just written a book, The Book of Murder, it's called. He was a great guest. I think you may know him. But anyway, we asked him about the Menendez thing because it was just beginning to gurgle to the surface. It just happened a couple of weeks ago. And he became incensed almost that these allegations of abuse could even be dignified by the DA's office in any way investigated. His view was that these contemporaneous, this is what made me think of it, is the note that you're talking about, the letter that was sent that was, in a sense, hinting at the abuse. He said these contemporaneous type letters and emails, and these are oftentimes used by those who commit these awful murders. They, in a way, they sow the seeds for potential acquittal or excuses at the same time that they perpetrate these horrors. It was interesting to me to hear that from a prosecutor. Maybe you'll say, well, of course a prosecutor would say that, but it's also something that kind of did seem to make sense to me. Atlanta. He also said this, and then I'll, having given you this information, I want to hear your reaction. He said, the reports of abuse, he said, I just don't buy them. He said, I've been involved with over 1,000 cases of sexual abuse of teenagers and in families. And he said that Kitty Menendez would have been involved in it. He said, I've never seen that, where both parents would be involved with teenagers both being abused this way. He said, I just don't see. He said, give me this case in front of a jury and I'll convict them again. Now, what was your reaction to that?
Well, first of all, I was an assistant U.S. attorney, and I'm very familiar with the idea that a person who would premeditate a crime would also premeditate a cover-up.
Thank you.
Or
very well put. Yeah.
Or some excuse. And so, in this case, with the two of them, the prosecution narrative is that, of course, they went out and bought these guns. They went out and bought this ammunition. They plotted how they would get away with it. They were 18 and 21. Is it remarkable that they would also send a letter or tell somebody something that could be used as an excuse that I was being abused? And they indeed, and you can say that it's really not very corroborated at the time. One thing that's interesting about the political issue, and I do expect this to be an October surprise. I'd make my Katz that while the hearing's not until November 29th or so, I think that the incumbent progressive DA down here, Gascon, will make an announcement, maybe as early as the end of this week, but I think certainly by next week, that he's going to join their motion in some way or intervene and support their motion in some way. And that'll put the ball right back in the challenger's court, right? The former Bush official who may actually win down here. I think that he would probably join what Gascon is doing. And at that point, it would be kind of like a wedge issue, Mark, right? Because there'd be a lot of people like that prosecutor you spoke with who said, what? This is the law and order challenger? And he's also agreeing to this? Come on. And what else was interesting, Mark, was during their debate, the challenger kept saying, well, I'm a former prosecutor. You've never been a prosecutor. And then Gascon said, it's not about going into court and convicting people. It's about administering an enormous office. This job is to administer an enormous office, not to go down and be a great trial lawyer yourself. But of course, Gascon could turn around and say, you know what? Why don't we agree to a new trial? And Mr. Hochman, you go try them again. You go try them again. In terms of trying them again, let me just say this about the trials, because this has been portrayed in the shows. It's a multi-series show, and a lot of people have been sort of living this like almost they lived the OJ trial as it was happening. I mean, people are really into this case. And I'm not sure how close it is sometimes, because in the Monsters story, they tried to give all these different perspectives. One of them was someone has a perspective that's some incest between the two of them. That's not the main narrative. And they've said this is rubbish. This is nonsense. They've even threatened to sue on account of that.
Yeah, the Menendez brothers did. You're talking about that.
Yes,
they threatened to sue. Yeah.
You might say, what's the damage to their reputation? They admit that. I mean, there's never been a question, not never, but at the trials, there was never a question that they did it. It was just if they had this, as the judge termed it, abuse excuse. At the first trial, they had separate trials, Mark, and this goes way back. I was an assistant U.S. attorney with Adam Schiff in the office when this happened and when it first went to trial. And the first trial, 89, 90, something like that, they had separate trials, Mark, and each one had a hung jury. They said there was a gender split on the jury. And I guess the gender split meaning that women were more sympathetic to that defense. And men were like, are you kidding? You got shotguns. You killed your two parents. You killed your mother. Your mother didn't even abuse you. Come on. What possible reason? Murder. The split at the separate trials, Mark, was some of them for murder, some of them for manslaughter. But they couldn't agree, 12 of them on either one. And so they had to have a retrial. At the retrial, that was not televised. This was 2 televised trials before we had the OJ spectacle, the OJ televised trial. At that one, the judge tried them both together, didn't have cameras, and they said they were entitled to something called imperfect self-defense, which is that they thought their parents were going to kill them. A reasonable person would not have thought their parents were going to kill them, but they had an unreasonable fear, and that unreasonable fear, honestly held, they said, honestly held, but unreasonable. A reasonable person wouldn't have had it, should knock it down to manslaughter. The judge looked at it and said, you know what, that's not a proper defense. So when you hear all these things that the abuse excuse wasn't allowed, it was in the context of not giving that instruction and allowing that imperfect self-defense. That, Mark, went up to the appeals court, and the appeals court in an unpublished decision said the judge hadn't made any error. One of the things the 2 brothers are up against is that they lost in the appeals court. They went to the California Supreme Court. The California Supreme Court wouldn't hear it. And then they also had a penalty phase. After they were found guilty of murder, they had a penalty phase, Mark, whether it ought to be death or it ought to be life in prison without parole. The jury found in their favor. And at that hearing, that was only on penalty. At that hearing, they let everything in, and the jury decided no death, but a life without parole. You could say, even with all of that, Mark, it happened so long ago. Haven't they been rehabilitated in prison? And some of their argument is that they've simply been rehabilitated in prison, and that all of this is really fascinating, what would happen in a new trial, all this history that I just told you. But at the end of the day, isn't 34 years enough? And that's what Gascon, the incumbent progressive prosecutor down here, has said. He's really indicated that he's going to that he's going to agree with that they paid. He said, and we're looking at morally and ethically, haven't they paid their debt to society? If he's talking like that, it seems very clear that he's going to join the request. And then other people have said, what should they do?
Well, they shotgunned their parents' faces off. You tell me, was that 34 years enough? I mean, I mean, again, repeatedly, it wasn't just that, but they went back. They doubled back to
Mark, the amazing part of the story is they then went about spending their parents' fortunes. And the argument from the prosecution point of view is the reason that they killed the mother had nothing to do with abuse. It had nothing to do that she silently didn't do anything about the abuse, or she acquiesced in the abuse. It was that she was utterly blameless, but she would have inherited the money, not them. And they wanted the money. So they had to kill the mom too and get the money. They went on a huge spending spree, and that ended up being the huge evidence against them that they went on this huge spending spree, bought loads and loads of money. It turns out they had life insurance too. They spent some of it on very expensive lawyers. That's a whole other story in the case, the expensive lawyers that they had, because as I said, they went through those trials. And then another fascinating part of the story, if I can just mention this for 1 minute, is that one of them went to a psychiatrist and told the psychiatrist, and this is totally covered by the privilege, this never should have been revealed. The psychiatrist broke privilege, told it to his girlfriend, and his story was that he told it to his girlfriend because he was worried that if they murdered their parents in such a cruel, awful way, as you just said, maybe they'd come and murder him now that he knew their secret. He wanted somebody to be a witness. That was his story. He had no right to reveal it to her. After they broke up, Mark, shocking, your viewers will be stunned. She suddenly realized that she needed to tell that to the authorities. And so she told that to the authorities. That was their first huge lead. Now, you could say it's improper, it's fruit of the poisonous tree, but it's a rare judge that's going to suppress a murder case because it's fruit of the poisonous tree. Then they went and they looked at the spending records and they saw how much money they were all spending. A lot of these people are still alive. This psychiatrist, I think, therapist had to give up his license, but he's still out there. You know, as part of this whole inquiry, the fascination with this case, they've gone and see, is this lawyer still alive? Is this judge still alive? Is this famous witness from the case still alive? But my prediction, Mark, and people are really, really talking about this, and I'm sure some people will have a lot more detail. I couldn't get into all of it, but I do think that the incumbent DA down here is going to make a last-minute issue of this, and I expect the challenger will say, number one, he made a last-minute issue of this. It's an October surprise, but at the end of the day, the challenger will have to take a position on this, and I think it's going to be very hard if he denies it. If he says no, if he says I don't know what I'm going to do, they're going to say no. Decide. You want this job as DA? Make a decision. If he makes a decision that they ought to get resentenced or they ought to get retried, people will say, what? Come on, this has been decided by the appeals court over and over again. There's nothing really new in that period of time. They got life without parole. Life without parole means life without parole. They could have gotten death. That was the jury's decision, to give them mercy and life without parole.
So your prediction is that the DA is going to make an announcement, or is your prediction what the announcement's going to be?
No, I think that he's going to make an announcement, and I think the announcement is going to be, I think it's too fraught to say they ought to get a new trial.
So you think he'll pass on a new trial for them?
I think he'll pass on a new trial, Mark, and I think he'll say that he does join the request that they be resentenced. They've spent long enough in jail. There's evidence of rehabilitation. There's some new evidence. Let's give them a second chance at life, even if they did something so awful as that. And that will put the challenger in the position, if he says no, if he says what your prosecutor says, if he says, look, I'm the law and order candidate. Okay, that's been the problem. People have gotten too many breaks in this city. And these people now are getting another break from our DA, who always wants to give people a break. He's the DA. He's not supposed to always want to give people a break. No. If he says that, people will think he's very unsympathetic, because there's a lot of sympathy now for the two of them to be released. And if he says, yes, I agree to release them, he's got this enormous amount of money from the police unions. He's running with the money. The challenger is from the police unions. Same old story.
You think the challenger is going to weigh? Hochman's going to weigh in and say he thinks that they should be released? Is that your prediction as well?
I think that I think that he's going to say, he's going to mealy mouth it. I think he's going to mealy mouth it. Yes, Mark, but I think that he's going to say they should certainly look at it. They should have sympathy for them.
I mean, if it's a pure political play, I don't see how that's politically expedient, because I get it. It's a Netflix show. It's getting a lot of buzz. I don't know. I'm sure there's polling and internal polling he has on where the electorate is. But is that a political winner for him to all of a sudden, jump on the Menendez case and suggest that they be freed?
I'm not a political commentator, but I think, first of all, I think that Gascon's going to do it because he's 20 points behind in the polls. And
I get it. Gascon's got nothing to lose, but what about Hochman? I don't get it.
It's a hard call for him, Mark. So you think that he's going to, know more about politics than I do, Mark. You've been watching this for a long time, commenting on it. I don't know about that, but I'm a legal commentator. But I just think the point is, if he says, no, I'm not for this at all, there's an awful lot of sympathy for them. Especially, there's a younger brother too. He's the one who wrote the letter about abuse. It's newly discovered evidence.
Maybe there's a lot.
Mark, one last thing. The family, you got to remember, there's the same family. So the overwhelming majority of family members, victims' family members in this case, are for them getting a break. They held this huge press conference, and their own family is the family of the two victims are for these particular perpetrators getting a break. It's rather a fraught issue, and I think it's all we're going to see what happens soon enough, Mark. But I think it's
tricky. I mean, normally I'd say let sleeping dogs lie, but the dogs aren't so sleeping anymore. Here's Cheryl saying, I've listened to tons of testimony, and every member of the family supported this abuse. Two things can be possible. I initially thought just as you do. So she believes the abuse, and she also feels it sounds like that should be, admissible and perhaps a hook on which to hang some sort of new freedom for the Menendez brothers on. I've got to move on because I only have you for another minute, and I really wanted to get to the other.
Mark, one last thing. I think Hochman from my old office, I think, is going to look heartless unless he plays this one just right. I think it's a little fraught for him, and I'll be interested to see what he does. He's a capable, talented person, Hochman. I know him from the U.S. Attorney's Office.
I think Gascon is going down. So I don't see any percentage, particularly politically, in taking any chances. But as you may have suggested here, it's less of a chance to come in on the side of Menendez's freedom than it is to kind of keep them incarcerated. Maybe that's true. I don't know. It seems to me, again, like, don't touch anything. You're going to win. Gascon is going to lose. I would say to Hochman, just leave everything alone.
Gascon will make him touch it. Gascon will make him touch it because he'll make his announcement, and everyone will turn to Hochman and say, "What's your position? We want to know what you think." And the victims, the victim's family is also the perpetrator's family, and therefore release. Victims' rights.
I get it. I mean, and that's one of the things that I will deal with on day one when I become district attorney, is what I would say. All right. The former president, Donald Trump, I want to quickly finish with this, David Katz. This summer, apparently, this is breaking news. This is a big story last night. It was broken. Trump offered a financial incentive to adult film star Stormy Daniels if she agreed to keep quiet about Trump, including about the relationship that became the center, of course, of the hush money payments that ended up with the New York criminal trial. Daniels it was offered essentially a deal that would take off of her bottom line that she owed the Trump people, if you want to think it this way, because she had a judgment against her for hundreds of thousands of dollars. She was offered to take something off of that money that was owed if she would sign a document that would essentially bind her to no longer speaking about Trump in any forum. So this is, and you'll correct me if I'm wrong, the exact thing that got him into trouble the last time, which is paying money, but and again, it's not the hush money payment that I think you can pay hush money. It's not even illegal. But the idea somehow that you fold it into this other thing, which is the settlement for your court case and the agreement that the court is handling, that's the illegal part, I think. But that's why you're here. Tell me what's illegal and tell me how this all washes down.
Well, it's ironic, of course, because he got in so much trouble over something that has the same sort of bad smell. But I think this one's not illegal because what he got prosecuted for in New York was falsifying the business records, showing that it was something other than what it was. Here, I guess they were going to show it for what it was. She wanted she wanted to pay only $620,000. They wanted her to pay $650 or $660. They said, we'll settle at your price. We'll settle at $620, Stormy, but you have to sign here this non-disclosure agreement. So it was, liable to blow up in the press and have Rachel Maddow and you and a lot of other people lampoon Trump once again, trying to pay off Stormy Daniels, give her some money to shut up. But it's hush money in the sort of like comedian sense. It's not that manufacturing false records, reporting false records like what he did in that case. The people may wonder, what on earth does she owe him money for? But at the time, she had Michael Avenatti, I believe, as her attorney still. He's in prison, serving a term right now. But at that time, I guess they sued Trump for something, and the court found that there was no proper basis for it. And if you file a lawsuit without doing proper legal and factual research or on frivolous grounds. Now, people think, well, Trump does this all the time, but Trump has huge amounts of lawyers to fight it off when you say, hey, it was frivolous, you ought to be sanctioned. Apparently, this lawsuit didn't end well either for her or Avenatti. Some judge said, look, this wasn't all your lawyer's fault. You, Stormy Daniels, should have investigated more. You shouldn't have made what the judge found were frivolous claims. So we're sanctioning you, not just the lawyer, Avenatti, but we're sanctioning you. And at some point, she had a GoFundMe, and she figured she'd just pay the $600,000 instead of beating it to death. She doesn't have the money to beat it to death, and she wants to start a new career and a new life for herself.
Right, exactly. That's a great summary of how we got to this moment. And for those who wonder how she could be on the hook for anything, go back and listen to what David just said. That's exactly right. And so based on everything I've read as well. And so it's odd how this works, but it's something distinctly different than the hush money trial. Even though that hush money was all about Stormy Daniels, the Stormy Daniels judgment came out of a defamation case. So it's interesting. David, I love our time together and so grateful for your thoughts on the Menendez thing. It is kind of a both renewed interest and maybe a lot of relevance in this DA race, which, as you suggest, they may have to weigh in on both sides soon. And of course, the Trump stuff in the Georgia voting case is so very critical. So we look forward to more. You can find David Katz across the English-speaking world. I say, British radio and London Morning Drive. David Katz joins us from Los Angeles. I love the way they say Los Angeles when they bring you on. Los Angeles. But it's a great pleasure and an honor, pal. Love having you in. Thanks so much.
That's how they pronounce it in the UK. People should also look in on News Nation on Saturday or Sunday around 4 or 5 o'clock. I'm on there most weekends, and I wish I were up there in San Francisco with you. It sounds like a beautiful setting.
It is indeed. It's great weather, and this SF Fall show is really something special. Yeah, News Nation, you class up the joint. Good to see you on there. All right. See you, David Katz.
We have promo. And,
we do. We're all FOMO. See you, pal. Thank you.
The Mark Thompson Show.
I am loving it. Loving it, loving it, loving it. Kim, I ask you, what do I still have to do? I am excited to join from San Francisco. I'd like to get even like a little news. There was big news out of Israel.
I have it. Mm-hmm.
And I'd love to get that. I mean, this is huge. I mean, that the architect of the October 7th attack on Israel, which has changed the course of events in the Middle East so substantially that we can reasonably sit here and talk about Iran and Israel getting into a hot war along with Lebanon and Gaza and Yemen. These are massively sensitive and nuanced issues, all kicked off, at least since October 7th, by this guy who I believe the Israeli army may have just killed in Gaza. But let's get a little news from Kim. I can't run really much over the top of the hour, but we'll do what we can. Let's get a kind of turbo news capsule. Can we do that,
Sure,
Kim?
absolutely. Mm-hmm.
Tony, you have to run the news theme, though, because I don't all right. Oh, that's very well done. Yes, all right. Kim's news and back in a moment.
On the Mark Thompson Show, I'm Kim McAllister. The 2024 presidential race continues today, 19 days until Election Day. Vice President Kamala Harris making multiple campaign stops in Wisconsin today, including Milwaukee and Green Bay. Former President Trump giving remarks at the Al Smith dinner in New York. Speaking of Trump, his lawyers are asking the judge in his federal January 6th case to delay the release of a redacted appendix that contains evidence gathered by special counsel Jack Smith. The redacted appendix was set to be released today, but Trump's legal team is asking for the release to be delayed until November 14th, a little over a week after Election Day. Israel says the leader of Hamas was killed in Gaza. Yahya Sinwar was declared the Palestinian militant group's new leader in August. Israeli officials say at least 3 militants were killed during operations in Gaza, and NBC News is reporting that a U.S. official is confirming Sinwar's death. New York Governor Kathy Hochul throwing her support behind New York City Mayor Eric Adams as he fights federal corruption charges. The governor was challenged by a reporter today who asked why she won't demand his resignation, but did demand resignations from Adams, that Adams overhaul his top staff members who have not been charged with a crime. She said the difference is staff members are employees at will. The mayor is in office at the will of the voters. Former President Trump says he's the father of IVF. He voiced his support for in vitro fertilization during a Fox News town hall event. He went on to say, "We want fertilization, and it's all the way, and the Democrats tried to attack us on it." Vice President Harris questioned Trump's claim in a post on X, saying his abortion bans have already jeopardized access to IVF in states across the country. Kellogg's is on the hot seat with more than 1,000 protesters demanding they stop using harmful additives in their breakfast cereals. Imagine that. You don't want to eat harmful additives? Led by activist Vannie Harry, the protesters gathered outside the Michigan headquarters of Kellogg to make their demands known this week and serve up a petition. In 2015, the food giant promised to remove artificial ingredients and colors like Red 40 and Yellow 5, among others, from their products.
My favorite. Red 40.
By 2018. Yeah, it's so good.
Really.
Organizers say they've not done that in the United States. So they said they'd do it in 2018. They still haven't done it. No.
Most doctors say you need more Red 40 in your diet. It's the kind of thing that really does extend your life.
This is a really sad story. The family of former One Direction singer Liam Payne says they are heartbroken following his death. He died yesterday at the age of 31 after falling from his hotel balcony in Argentina. In a statement released by his family, they said Liam will live forever in our hearts and we'll remember him for his kind, funny, and brave soul. Not yet known if the fall was intentional or an accident. Some states are much more politically engaged than others. Maryland, Virginia, New Jersey, Oregon, Washington, Montana, Minnesota, California, Arizona, and New York are the top 10 most politically engaged states, according to Wallet Hub. They looked at 10 key indicators of political engagement, ranging from voter registration and laws to the percentage of people who voted in recent elections, even to political contributions. Some states, they say, are much more politically engaged than others, in part because they emphasize civic education in schools. It's something David K. Johnston has talked about. And they remove barriers to voter registration. There's also a direct correlation between higher education leading to more politically engaged populace.
Yeah, I mean, that makes total sense, right? I mean, if you aren't aware of something, you're not aware of your ability to have a role in decision-making politically, if you're just not aware of, basic civics, then how could you possibly be expected to participate to the same degree of those as those who are aware of that? It makes total sense.
More than 30,000 Californians are bracing for the lights to possibly go out today. This is PG&E's biggest planned power shutoff advisory in the last 3 years. It's because of low humidity and high winds creating extreme fire danger. The power outage
This is in Northern California, just to be pure about it. That's where
the power outages stretch over 400 miles in 28 counties, from Shasta in the north to Santa Barbara in the south. There's a red flag warning in place tonight through Saturday. Forecasters say the biggest threat, Sacramento Valley, the adjacent foothills, especially west along I-5. Yeah.
Yeah, it's scary. I mean, wind scares me, for all the reasons that are associated with those things that destroy life in California, like fire.
A massive California refinery is closing down next year. This is Phillips 66 near the Port of Los Angeles. It contributes about 8% of the gas supply. The company plans to continue working with the state to maintain current levels and potentially increase supplies. A spokesperson says the decision to shut down isn't politically motivated or in response to the new law Governor Gavin Newsom just signed. That law requires refineries to have backup fuel on hand if they go down for maintenance, the goal to avoid supply shortages that spike gas prices. And lastly, Disneyland is creating sticker shock again. They've got a new way to skip lines. A Lightning Lane Premier Pass launches Wednesday for $400. It lets visitors in both Southern California theme parks get on rides when they want without having to pick specific arrival times. So they have a list of rides here that are affected. The pass does not include admission. It is way more expensive than it used to be. So if you want to skip the lines, it's going to cost you big, big money. Man. And this report is sponsored by CoachellaValleyCoffee.com. I feel a little lucky today because I have got my Coachella Valley Coffee iced tea.
Your iced tea is special, huh? Yeah.
Good morning.
Whereas the iced tea, we've got we miss our cold brew. We love the cold brew. Courtney makes the cold brew regularly, and I miss my El Gato espresso.
It's so good. It's so good.
There's the cold brew. Tony's got it on the screen now. CoachellaValleyCoffee.com. Yeah.
It is hand roasted. It
all
is
organic and from women-owned farms. How great!
Such a treat. Check out the website CoachellaValleyCoffee.com. CoachellaValleyCoffee.com. Take a look at it, see if there's anything you like, and if so, at the end when you're checking out and you see the little code area on the website, enter Mark T, all together, no spaces, Mark T, and that'll get you an exclusive 10% off at CoachellaValleyCoffee.com. I'm Kim McAllister, and this is The Mark Thompson Show.
The Mark Thompson Show.
Who's Mark Thompson?
Hey Mark, it's George Santos here. A lot of people are telling me you're a liar.
That's pure speculation.
What's a little lie between friends?
Morning.
We're in better shape, but I don't think we're in wildly better shape.
Your Honor, I'd like to ask for a recess.
This is a word from the Lord, and he's not happy.
Good day, sir.
Seriously, what the
Why are you yelling?
What up, everybody? Greetings from San Francisco, California. It is a remote broadcast. We'll be here for one more day and then back to our home studio. Appreciate everybody stopping through. Did a lot about both Trump and Harris in their respective forums with the media in the first hour. Did a lot of David Katz and Menendez brothers, and also the Georgia voting situation in the and the judge's decision there in the second hour. And we had, of course, Bob Christian, who's running for Congress in Georgia in the first hour as well. So go check that out. Ms. Organic with a $15 super chat. Have a martini at the Red Jack. Cheers. Yeah, we may go by the Red Jack later. That really is a great idea. I love that idea. Thank you, Ms. Organic. Yeah, here in San Francisco, there are a lot of places to have a cocktail, but there's only one place that has our heart, and it is the Red Jack Saloon. So check them out and live it up. And a good little piece of the martinis they spin off to the show, which is really cool. And the owners of the Red Jack, and I love this, and this is how we first became aware of them back when we were on the radio. Yeah. They live above the saloon, which I just feel is like the most sitcom-rich premise that I could possibly come up with. But no one's done the sitcom yet. But we love that they participate and are so connected to us. The Red Jack Saloon in San Francisco. Wes is one of our super supporters and gives us a super sticker for $5. Thank you for that, Wes. And do I have my big shout out with me? I thought I did, but I may not. I don't know where anything is on this little portable board that I'm given, but I don't see it. So I'll just say smash
it with your iron rod.
I can see that. I see the. Anyway,
the audience can't hear you because your mics are cut.
I see. Okay.
Shout out.
Migrants are eating people's pets using strange spices and not ketchup.
Oh, no.
The most un-American thing of all. It's a disaster, says Ashburn Knudsen in Norway. That will poison the blood of our country, and climate change is a hoax. Take away the keys to grandpas, please. Yeah, that's
I don't like flies.
Yeah, I don't know what
people don't leave my rallies.
Yeah, people don't leave your rallies, sir. Of course they don't. I don't know how that got out there, but
the left is trying to take away your children and turn them into non-binaries.
Yeah, of course, that's what's happening. Mark Petrie, hey, thank you, Mark. Wow, 12 spot in a super sticker, and thank you very much.
I've never seen anything like it.
No, it's really the outpouring from our audience is something quite special. Happy birthday to chat great Ricky O'Bear 1. Is it Ricky O'Bear's birthday today?
Happy birthday! Woo-hoo!
Love Ricky O'Bear. First into our show, I feel like, among those who are here very early, buys our merch, gets into different chats and, of course, the live chat, but also after hours, he'll always comment on various pieces of video, and that's really important because the degree to which people are engaging with the channel helps us in the algorithm, and that's just terrific. So, Ricky, you've been there. Congratulations on all the merch you've purchased and in all the ways that you supported us, and apparently there's a lot of love for you in the chat. Ricky is one of my favorite people in the chat, B.A. Ware says, and so we wish you a very happy birthday, sir. The lady Beatrice with a $5 super chat. She says, the constant interruption is so unprofessional, and I don't think Fox will address this because I bet they told him to be so unprofessional. Well, here's what I think they told him to do, and I said this before, but I'll just reiterate it. I think they said, rough her up, go after her. I mean, she gets all of these friendly type environments to espouse whatever she wants to say. No one really holds her to account. And as I said, I think he was criticized going into the interview for even doing the interview. So he's carrying all that to this moment. So when she gets in there, he wanted to show what a tough guy is. So he's trying to shiv her every way he could. And I thought that in the end, he did seem rude and so completely impertinent that it was it left you with a bad taste in your mouth. I thought she handled it okay, as I say. I mean, again, and this is the problem with being a woman. Women are held to a standard that is absurd. Absurd given the fact that men are not held to it. That's the reason. I mean, I don't mind an absurd standard if both are going to be held to an absurd standard. But to hold one to this absurd standard where you could call her a bitch if she comes on too heavy, you could, there are all of these, they're evaluating her look, the way she speaks, all of this stuff. Guys just don't get any of that. They just don't. And a guy would have blasted right back at him like, hey, excuse me. I'm talking right here. You invited me for this sit down. We agreed to it. If you want to have it, you have to let me answer, okay? If this is just your setup to prove to MAGA land of how tough a guy you are, then let me leave now. This is absurd. A guy could say that and it would be strong. She says it and she's bitchy. She's, women, and I think this is true with Hillary Clinton. She had a rough go in that same way. So, that's
so interesting you bring that up, because one of the things that I think Kamala Harris was strongest on during that Fox interview is the Constitution, and being righteously offended that Trump would use the military against American citizens. But she was so passionate and so heated about it that she skirted that line between angry mom voice and getting shrill. Right. And so there's this moment where then people are like, oh, I can't listen to that voice for the next 4 years. And it's not anything that's done to men. So how does she come off as passionate, as upset, but not cross over into, she's a yelling angry lady? It's really difficult.
I didn't hear her yelling, but the passion, I think, is a decent point. It's always tricky. Yeah. I think women are held to a tougher standard. And
it's impossible.
I think it's very, very hard. Exactly. Ashbourne, our new best friend in Norway, says Kamala and Tim Walz got the best ideas and a future for family farms and rural communities, schools, healthcare, and safety for your kids. That's the truth. Ashbourne, I mean, I agree that, it's a step backward to go with Trump. And not to mention, look, I don't think you have to, even a superficial examination of a guy who engineered a coup. I think that pretty much DQs him. I don't understand how he's even eligible. I mean, it's insanity. Best wishes to Bob Christian. Be a force of good. Work for your electorate and not lobbyists, says Osborne. And you got our respect from Norway and a 50 kroners. Thank you. Shout out to the new Mark Thompson subscriber, Yasani, says Noe Marie, with a $5 super chat. Gives that Yasani, the new Mark Thompson Show subscriber, a shout, and also to the USA. The shout out goes, may she defeat Trump so that we may collectively unclench. It has been quite a clench fest, hasn't it? Yeah, good point, Noe Marie. Fire Monkey for $50 super chat. Wow. Happy anniversary. It is our 2-year anniversary for those who may not know. Late to the party. Been listening to talk radio for a while. KGO, part of the mix. All good for critical thinking. Wow. Thank you, Fire Monkey. And that's very generous. A $50 super chat. Thank you. We need it. We're a crowd-funded show. And, of course, there's Patreon and PayPal hot links under all our videos and this one as well. Louis says for a $5 super chat, GOP threat assess equals hay fever plus hives equals threat to national security versus being a sociopathic megalomaniac equals no problem, second term worthy. Yeah, exactly. So that's their threat assessment. If the hay fever and hives is a national security threat, but the sociopathic megalomaniac, no problem, second term. Crazy. Let's get it on. Before I leave you, Bob Costas, I believe, was on CNN and made these comments. Go ahead.
He is by far the most disgraceful figure in modern presidential history. He's only become more disgraceful since 2016 and since 2020. He is.
No, not so much for that. Well, you got the idea. We'll run more Costas tomorrow. It was quite the run from Costas. I was quite surprised.
20. He is a bubbling cauldron of loathsome traits.
All right. Stop, please. Start it again from the beginning. This is...
He's a bubbling cauldron.
This is unbelievable, Tony. Can we start at the beginning, please? Can you?
He is by far the most disgraceful figure in modern presidential history. He's only become more disgraceful since 2016 and since 2020. He is a bubbling cauldron of loathsome traits, and it's only those who are actually suffering from Trump derangement syndrome, which is the way they and Fox News and all the rest of MAGA media try to brush aside all the legitimate criticisms of Trump. You have to be in the throes of some sort of toxic delusion in a toxic cult to believe that Donald Trump has ever been, in any sense, emotionally, psychologically, intellectually, or ethically fit to be president of the United States. But his supporters are locked in on that. There is no cult of Joe Biden.
Yeah, well, no cult of Joe Biden. Yeah, Biden doesn't quite have that same sort of, am I right? Oh, there are a couple of cult members? Okay. Well, I've loved our time together. Mark, I highly recommend walking around the Fort Mason and Aquatic Park areas. There's also a new park called Francisco Park at the corner of Bay and Hyde. Lovely sidewalks and lovely views, says Michael D. Now that I'm here in San Francisco, I may do that. I really might. Looking forward to going now. Thanks for staying for the whole show, Mark. That was nice of you. Yeah, I like to dance out early. What? Thank you, Trevor, in Hollywood. More of your drops tomorrow, Trevor, the new set of drops. Murphy Rowan, you look and sound great, Mark. Going remote is treating you well. Wow, we need a little more of Murphy Rowan. And there is Francisco Park.
Oh, nice.
Tony has found it. Very
Great
well
views.
done, Tony. Yeah, really impressive.
Thanks, Tony.
Yeah, great views. There are always great views in the Bay Area, and it's just so beautiful. I absolutely love this community, and it's fun to be here, and in a way, revisit the past, because I was here in the 80s for many years, and I really did love it. So I'm a reluctant farewell. Mark, I'll try one more time. Can you come to our meetup tomorrow? And I can't. I want to, Sandy. I can't. It's in Los Gatos, and I'm in San Francisco, and then I'm leaving from the Oakland airport. So there's no way to make it. I'm not driving down. We flew up. So I would, if there was any way, of course, you don't think I'd love to meet everybody. That's why I say come up to Fort Mason today. You still got time. If you leave now, right now, from the South Bay, you can make it with time to spare. Mark will be demonstrating his parkour skills in the park. Stay tuned. I'm going to this San Francisco Fall Show at Fort Mason. They're in the Festival Pavilion, and feel free to join me. And if you do get there by 3:30, send an email to the show, markthompsonshow@gmail.com, and I'll come and say hi to you. And
I'm Shadow Stevens for The Mark Thompson Show. Bye-bye.
Kim's doing the after party live next. Check that out.
Out of time. Bye-bye.
Tomorrow, Florida and more. Till then, everyone, bye-bye.